Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. As an elite level runner and coach, I'm excited to introduce you to the All In Running Club. The All In Running Club exists to help you become a better runner. Whether you're a beginner, an elite runner, or anywhere in between, the mission of the All In Running Club is to give you the tools you need to find your success in running. Join today to take advantage of the 75% off yearly membership rate offer. Click the link below in the show notes to learn more. So thank you, David, for being a guest on this episode of the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm glad to be here with you today, Jerry.
So you're an environmental activist and expert in dealing with toxins and how we're exposed to them, and like the things that are out there that maybe we don't know, and in finding those things. How did you get into, like, how did that become something that you decided, like, this is what I want to pursue, is helping people understand the issue with toxicity in their food and in their environment?
I found that as a journalist, I was observing a lot of things happening in the environment, and I had a lot of inside information because I did a lot of testing too.
Okay.
But I found that shaming companies, I would hold press conferences in the early 2000s. Like I held one in 2007 where we named all the baby products with harmful ingredients like diethanolamine, which is a carcinogen. You might find it on the labels as cocamide DEA. We've gotten a lot of that out, but it's still there. But shaming didn't quite work.
Yeah.
Companies continue to do the same things. What really hurts them is financials,
Right.
taking money from their pocket.
Yeah.
So around 2012, I formed a nonprofit and began using a law in California called the Safe Drinking Water and Toxic Enforcement Act, which requires companies to disclose on their product labels when they have carcinogens or reproductive toxins at harmful levels. And the law is enforced by citizens. So I began using that law to enforce it. And immediately we got Bumblebee, Chicken of the Sea, Crown Prince, and several other major shellfish companies in California to start labeling their canned shellfish for lead and cadmium because they were such high levels.
Yeah.
And today, when you go to California, many of the shellfish products, the oysters, clams, scallops, will be labeled. And that's really important because, I want to be a good citizen, right? We need really smart kids. And if we're putting lead into their brains, and one of these servings of one of these shellfish products, for example, would harm a child because it's like 600 parts per billion lead, many equivalent to many glasses of lead contaminated drinking water from Flint, Michigan, for example.
Right.
So I had all this information. I wasn't seeing results. And so I kind of morphed from journalism into activism. And I still consider myself a journalist.
Right.
I deal with facts.
Right.
But if you're testing something and for example, we tested Justin's classic nut butters.
Okay.
Have you heard of Justin's almond butter?
No, I haven't heard of that.
Well, it's the most popular brand at Whole Foods.
Okay.
And we found through testing that it had very high levels of an industrial chemical in it that causes cancer.
Yeah.
And especially causes endometrial and uterine cancer. And all these kids are eating these snack products from Justin's because they think they're environmentally healthy. It's nut butter, so it's supposed to be paleo. But it had really high levels, so we sued them.
Yeah.
We're still working on that case. But the point is I'm trying to get the information out because the companies, like you said, when we were speaking before the show, often do hide this information from their shoppers.
Right. And it's from the standpoint of the companies, like, how many of them would you say are, and I don't want to say doing it on purpose because they're trying to harm somebody, but doing it on purpose because they're trying to make their product better, and so they're adding these ingredients that they assume are making it taste better or last longer or things like that, versus companies that are inadvertently doing it and going, oh, I didn't realize that was in there.
So you can't really blame um, them wanting to make better products for making
Right,
them more toxic.
right.
What really is happening are two things. One, there's so much inertia at companies. This is the way we've made our cosmetic formulas. We've always used sodium lauryl sulfate, which contains dioxane, a carcinogen.
Mhm.
You can see it on labels, folks, and we always will continue to use it. Also, if consumers don't notice the difference, then companies often, you don't get rewarded at a large corporation for calling out the problems internally.
Right,
You get punished.
right.
So people may say, hey, this is going on, I don't like it, and keep their mouth shut. I would say, though, that probably 2/3 of what companies are doing a good job
Mhm.
and trying to toe the line.
Right.
Where I think we lose a lot is companies like Justin's that know their products have high amounts of acrylamide,
Mhm.
General Mills with their checks,
Right,
and we take them to court and they continue to sell the product because court cases can move in glacial time.
right,
That's why it's
right.
important to get the information out. I think most of them, though, if they profess ignorance, it's really willful ignorance at this point.
Okay. And in your book, Raising Healthy Kids, and you sort of mentioned it already, is like it's the focus for you is on the kids, and it's while everybody obviously trying to be healthy, but really like the damage that we're doing at such a young age that's compounding in their bodies as they get older. Is this something that in the research that you've done about it, is it something that you see as just a recent problem, like the last couple of decades, or is this been going on for back into the 1940s and 50s, and it's just now we've got more or better testing to be able to find out what's in these products?
It's new. What we're dealing with now with chemical exposures really began in earnest after World War II with the petrochemical revolution.
Right.
And in fact, I'm helping to create a movement called the anti-toxic movement,
Hmm.
which is sort of like the anti-racist movement, where
Right.
you actually are trying to do things, not just be non-toxic, but actually kind of being a little smarter. We didn't even have a movement until Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring in the 1960s. We didn't even have the words like a part per billion or carcinogen
Hmm.
or environmental impact report until we created the vocabulary in the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
This is a really young movement. We've
Right.
always, our kids and us as adults, and I consider all of us kids. I wrote Raising Healthy Kids, Protecting Your Children from Hidden Chemical Toxins. But if you read the book and do it for yourself, as you're protecting your kids, it pays benefits for parents too. And
Sure.
it's a very symbiotic kind of relationship where you both benefit.
Yeah.
But we didn't even have the vocabulary to be anti-toxic until the 60s. We didn't even know what a part per billion or part per million was till the 70s and 80s. And we didn't even have organic foods until almost
Yeah.
2000.
Right.
So is this a young movement? It's probably one of the youngest movements. But what's exciting about being non-toxic or anti-toxic, what's exciting about it for me is it's probably one of the most influential and powerful movements. If we can just get everyone to realize how powerful their shopping decisions are.
Hmm.
So I'm very excited in that way. And I'll just give you an example of when I say it's anti-toxic, I'll just give you an example of what I mean. Um, in order to make sure Raising Healthy Kids could be used by everybody, I visited Cancer Alley, which is a stretch of about 85 miles between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, Louisiana,
Right.
where there are approximately 200 chemical plants
Right.
making all the chemicals we use in our cosmetics and our personal care products and our to pesticides, household cleaning products, and wetsuits, for example.
Right.
So in Cancer Alley, there's a little school called the Fifth Ward Elementary School. It's in Reserve, Louisiana,
Hmm.
and there's about 325 kids there. And in the 60s, DuPont built a plastic plant right next to the school. The school has been there for a long time. It was there during segregation.
Okay.
It's been there for a long, long time. This plant now manufactures neoprene, which is what the foamy fubber that's used in mouse pads, for
Right.
example,
Right.
wetsuits, koozies for your drinks to keep them cool. Well, the kids at the Fifth Ward Elementary School, which is right next to this neoprene plant, breathe in a chemical called chloroprene, Jerry, that causes cancer. And it's being found in the air that they breathe at about 70 times above
Oh my
even the
gosh.
lax EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, limits. It's
Wow.
well, EPA, the Department of Justice has sued the chemical plant to bring it in line because, frankly, the state of Louisiana is useless when it comes to regulating chemicals.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that's where you go when you're a chemical and you want to be free and go everywhere.
Right.
They have
Right.
more rights than the people.
Yeah.
So we went to this school, and I went with Robert Taylor, who founded Concerned Citizens of St. John, where the school is located. And we brought them 32 HEPA air filters. These are high efficiency particulate air filters
Right.
because the kids are breathing this really bad air, and the legal case filed by DOJ will take seemingly forever.
Mhm.
These kids can't wait.
Yeah.
So the air that they breathe now in their classrooms will be the cleanest they breathe all day because we've gotten them these air filters. I did it through my nonprofit
Yeah.
Healthy Living Foundation, along with Ecos, which is a cleaning brand, a really good cleaning brand. And
Hmm.
we helped bring the air filters down there along with Robert's group, Concerned Citizens. But I want to put a face on all these kids because I play music with Robert Taylor. He played keyboards for the late great Otis Redding.
Oh yeah.
So and Etta James. So
Yeah.
now when I go shopping, for example, Jerry, I needed to buy mouse pads. And I actually bought some made out of cork. In fact, I'll show you right
Okay.
here.
Yeah.
This is like being anti-toxic. Like this is a cork. This is a
Right.
cork.
Right.
This is a cork mouse pad. No neoprene.
Right.
No neoprene. I bought this instead of the older ones that I have around, like this, that's made
Yep.
from neoprene.
Right.
I did that because my friends live there
Yeah.
and there's this plant polluting them. And I want to put a face on it. I don't want to hurt them more.
Right.
We can't get rid of neoprene completely, but I can urge folks who are shopping, you know, buy like I did this, a mouse pad made out of cork next time.
Right. Right.
Instead of buying a wetsuit made out of neoprene, Patagonia offers wetsuits now that are made out of naturally sourced materials.
Right.
You don't need a koozie to keep a neoprene koozie to keep your drinks cold,
Hmm.
so that's kind of being anti-toxic, where you're kind of connecting your actions
Right.
with folks who are really suffering. These kids, my friend Robert, that's why to me it's very exciting to be anti-toxic and to talk about this movement because these are my neighbors,
Right.
whether you're like you are in Texas or I'm in California or Louisiana. As Americans and parents, we really got to be connected with each other.
Yeah.
We can't start separating everyone by red and blue,
Right.
black and white. When it comes to chemical toxins, um, everyone's fate is tied together.
No, that's true. And yeah, you hit home a little bit there because I grew up in Baton Rouge. So, I will tell you, like for the people listening, like there's a smell that's different around that part of Louisiana to the air. If you go to certain places down there, it's like, oh, why does it smells chemically? Like you can tell in parts down there because there are so many chemical plants around.
Oh yeah, and these chemicals get in the drinking water.
Right.
1.3 million Louisianans drink water with atrazine
Yeah.
and hexachlorocyclopentane and simazine and phthalates and
Yeah.
benzene, all of which have been found in local drinking water supplies.
Right.
So, when people ask, well, can I be non-toxic and is it expensive? That's the other thing. As an activist, I kind of live on a budget.
Right.
I don't have a lot of money to spend on, $5,000 to do this for my house or anything.
Right.
So I point out in Raising Healthy Kids, the very inexpensive things you can do that yield so many benefits. Like, if if you have $100 and you want to improve your drinking water long term, should
Mhm.
you buy more bottled water? Well, obviously your $100 won't go that long.
Right.
Plus, you're buying more plastic. Should
Right.
you test? Well, I can guarantee you that 90% of the water tested will have a contaminant in it,
Oh yeah.
whether it's legal or illegal, because even the legal contaminants, that are used to disinfect drinking water
Mhm.
form carcinogens that in the final product you still need to get rid of. They've
Right.
gotten rid of the bacteria, but you need to get rid of these what are called disinfectant byproducts.
Right.
So you have this $100. What I would say is, no, buy a faucet mounted filter,
Right.
$25 online. Get yourself a pitcher filter like Zero Water, which removes forever chemicals and other heavy duty toxins.
Right.
Another $25 is $50. Get yourself a shower filter because you breathe
Yep.
in a lot of the toxins, another $25. And if you garden, get yourself a hose filter.
Right.
For about $100, you've done so much more for your health and your kids' health than any in medical insurance, any health
Right.
insurance, any prescription drug,
Yeah.
and it's going to last. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, you know, what being anti-toxic is about. And you got to remove this myth that you have to be rich to protect
Right.
yourself, things like that.
Well, and like you said, it's about what are the little things I can do to minimize exposure,
Oh yeah, they really add up.
And they do. And I have a friend, and I've had him on the podcast before because I helped his wife. She was going through liver problems and wound up having a liver transplant. And through that process, one of the doctors we encountered said, you need to take all your cleaning products and put them in one box and put them in the garage as far away from her as possible to limit her liver's need to process all these other things going through her body while she's waiting for the transplant. And I'll never forget, he said, I did that. And, you grab your bottle of cleaning supply out of your kitchen, is no big deal. You don't really notice much. But he said, you put them all in one box and you put them in a corner garage. And about 2 days later, you go in the garage and you go, holy cow, what's that smell? Like the chemicals, because when they're concentrated, all of a sudden, and they're all in one spot, it's just like that smell is overpowering. And then you realize I've been smelling that all along, all throughout my house.
And even if you don't smell them and you're using products like Tilex, Lysol,
Hmm.
Mr. Clean, who ain't so clean when it comes to his ingredients, um, even if you don't smell them, you should have a high efficiency particulate air filter like we brought to the kids
Hmm.
at the Fifth Ward, and something like that for a large room is about $70.
Right.
So again, these are things, the little, like you're saying, little things, but you kind of have to bust through a lot of not knowing and myths that
Right.
people have too.
Right.
Like the big one is that organic foods are too expensive for me because I'm on a budget.
Right.
I get this all the time. And this is one of the myths that I really have to explode because your child's diet and your diet as an adult, well, that's everything. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the ball game. And what people think is that organic foods are so much more expensive. They were at one time. When I was buying organic strawberries in the early 2000s, because they were at the time much more difficult to raise organically. They're a soft-skinned fruit, and
Right.
they get fungus and they get sprayed with a lot of fungicides. Um, uh, you know, they were very expensive then, but now um, prices have come down. So what I point out is that um, you can buy all the staples like celery, carrots, lettuce,
Hmm.
oranges, apples, for about the same price as conventionally grown. And
Right.
that's because we've created the demand, those of us who have been doing it for a long time, and the price has gone down as demand has gone up. And
Right.
the techniques for growing organic foods have improved a great deal.
Right.
And there's a reason why you buy organic. Studies do show that the organic has far fewer chemical residues.
Hmm.
They're not perfect organic foods, but they do have far fewer. And studies also show that kids who are on an organic diet have lower rates of cancer,
Hmm.
They have less eczema and other allergies. They have less obesity and diabetes. And mom, when you're on an organic diet during pregnancy, you will have less complications and you're less
Right.
chances of birth defects.
Right. And speaking of pregnancies and birth defects, and all of these toxins are affecting fertility, right?
We have a big issue with fertility.
Right.
I'll just give you another example about hidden chemical toxins. One of the companies that we sued several years ago was California Olive Ranch, which is the nation's biggest producer of um, or industrial olive oil.
Mhm.
And their growers were using a pesticide called carbaryl on their crops. Carbaryl has been largely banned for use in Europe and throughout the United States, and particularly in California,
Yeah.
because it attacks male sperm at very low levels.
Yeah.
And this company was selling this product. I felt like it was an experiment. What happens, Jerry, when we talk about fertility is because of all the damage from chemical toxins, you have a lot of couples who are on the cusp of infertility.
Right.
With a little nutritional help, a little antitoxic, low toxic living,
Hmm.
some the right vitamins, maybe the man can get his sperm count up and healthier sperm,
Right.
and mom's eggs can be produced in a little bit better shape. But when you're consuming an everyday product like olive oil that has low doses of carbaryl,
Mhm.
you're sending this percentage of the population that was just barely fertile, you're
Yeah.
tipping the odds against them ever having kids.
Right.
So, where we've got a court case with this California Olive Ranch, and they should do the right thing. They should have done the right thing many years ago and never have been using this carbaryl.
Right. Right.
You know, you can't plead innocence because in 2004, Dr. John Meeker, a really well-known epidemiologist,
Hmm.
showed he was working with a fertility clinic at Harvard University, and the men who were coming in, they were measuring their pesticide exposures,
Hmm.
and the men who had the highest everyday amounts of carbaryl, these were normal levels, high normal, but normal
Right.
levels within a
Right.
normal range, just high normal.
Yeah.
They were the ones most likely to have damaged sperm. They
Yeah.
couldn't quite make it all the way up
Yeah.
to reach the egg, or were misshapen, had weird shapes,
Yeah.
heads,
Yeah.
couldn't move. So um, you can't say that these companies didn't have the information. They just
Right.
don't want to know. And frankly, because this was hidden, they just presume, oh, well, consumers will never know.
Right.
No one will blame us
Right.
for the fact that they're not having a child.
Right.
But I can assure you that among their customers who were in that, subfertile range, that carbaryl exposure really hurt them. So
Hmm.
what's your answer? Buy organic, you can buy organic olive oil too. It's about,
Right.
believe me, it's the same price. And
Yeah.
this is a problem that could be eliminated.
Right.
So for fertility, yeah, we do have a problem. And examples like the one I just mentioned are one of the reasons why, because we're
Yeah.
exposing male sperm to some very toxic chemicals.
Well, and again, to address the pricing issue, even if it is 50 cents more or whatever, like that'll eventually come down based on supply and demand, and people will those companies that are not doing it right, if we stop buying their products because we realize that they're damaging us and harming us, then either one, they're going to go out of business, or two, they're going to change their ways and fix it because they want to stay in business.
Well, except that, they do hide this stuff.
Right.
Like the examples I've given you throughout this interview and that are in the book, Raising Healthy Kids, which you can get at Amazon. Um, you know, California Olive Ranch, Justin's, General Mills with their Chuck Snap mixes.
Hmm.
None of these companies are saying to their consumers, you know, Joe and Jerry and Jane, we've got a problem here. We've
Right.
got some chemicals, and they're not telling you that.
Right.
They're not. So that's why people like me, who expose this and then
Yeah.
reveal it and do it in a way which I hope is informative and empowering are
Right.
so important, because these companies won't change their ways unless they're caught.
Right. Right. Um, and so, yeah, and you mentioned Europe earlier in that, one of those is been banned in Europe and we're still using it here. Um, and I remember I've seen this a few different times with a few different product labels where somebody will post something online and say, like, oh, look at the way that they label their oatmeal in Europe and the way it's labeled here and how short the ingredient list is and how long it is here. And, part of that is tied to the restrictions in Europe as far as what can be used and what can't be used, correct?
Europe is far more restrictive,
Yeah.
and particularly with cosmetics.
Hmm.
But and also, but there are problems there. I was just dealing with a friend who works, who's actually a designer who I work with. He's in Serbia,
Okay.
and we were talking. He just had kids, and I told him you better filter your water, and we were talking about it. And he said, yeah, when when they were bombing our area back
Hmm.
in the 90s, um, they used radioactive tipped bombs,
Yeah.
and now there's radioactivity in our drinking water. And so we talked about how to, reduce radiation.
Hmm.
And then, we talked about a few other things too, like this is important actually for people in America everywhere where you live near a nuclear plant, for example.
Hmm.
Um, we talked about the need maybe for giving your kids more iodine-rich foods like
Right.
kelp supplements, or
Right.
even the cesium, the little iodine pills that prevent you from absorbing cesium-137
Hmm.
and other radioactive isotopes. Because if you live near a plant and you're downwind, you and your kids will inhale them, and
Right.
your risk for certain cancers like leukemia will go up. It goes up marginally.
Yeah.
But everything today is by the margins.
Right.
And if you're the one caught on the margin, your kid, you know, it breaks my heart. I know what it does to, I know what happens.
Right.
So,
Well, and the other
so
thing is you never know when you're going to be at the tipping point that's going to go over, right?
I
You
think you
could
should
be,
presume you are at the tipping point
yeah. I mean,
in
I think we
today's
all
society.
should because
You
the way we're exposed to so many different things that we don't even know about.
well, and we don't need to be.
Right.
That's the thing. There's a lot of helplessness. People will throw up their hands, Jerry, and just say, God, there's so many chemicals everywhere. Where do I start? It's like it's like waking up in the morning and going, oh, I have so many things to do.
Right.
So what I did and you go, I just want to go back to bed, right? I want to
Yeah.
get out of this thing. There's too many little. What I did in raising healthy kids is I broke it down into little steps with good stories and made it really simple and cheap
Yeah.
because that's the way I've had to do it with my kids. And I try to be really practical. Like, you don't have to be 100% organic. You
Right.
know, the studies showed that if you're about 60 to 70% organic, and they measure the levels of pesticides, for example, in
Hmm.
your urine, which is where we often measure them when we're
Right.
trying to find out what your toxic load is, the levels go down to almost non-detectable
Yeah.
for a lot of different pesticides and chemicals.
Right.
And I show you all the facts in the book. So it's not an insurmountable thing. In fact, it's not only insurmountable, but I would say this, it's every parent's duty
Yeah.
to know about chemical toxins and how they affect their kids and their community.
Right.
And the reason why I say that is, when I was growing up and even an adult in my 20s, and I'd look east growing up in California, and I'd look east to Washington, where all the adults are supposed to be.
Right.
As I've gotten a little older, these people are freaking idiots. They're
Yeah.
spineless.
Yeah.
They don't know what's going down.
Right.
And I can't afford to let them be in charge of my life. And
Right.
mom and dad, you can't trust them to be in charge of your kid's life either.
Yep.
They may tell you that a little bit of atrazine, like a part or 2 part per billion of atrazine or another pesticide or industrial chemical in your kid's drinking water, won't hurt them.
Hmm.
Now that's gaslighting. That's
Yeah.
a very rich fertilizer,
Yeah.
and nothing you put on that fertilizer is going to change it into anything else.
Right.
So you got mom and dad. That's a you know your leaders in Washington are not going to protect you. So you
No.
got to be aware. You've got to take this into your own hands. Our nation's future depends on it.
Yeah.
We wonder why um, democracy seems to be failing in so many ways.
Mhm.
Why can't we be reasonable? Why can't we agree on facts?
Right.
Why can't we see the implications of our decisions?
Yeah.
And this is kind of outlandish, Jerry, but I kind of am starting to believe it. But I think politically we're separating not into red and blue, but into dumbass and smart. And I'm really
Yeah.
worried about that
No, I
because
agree.
when I look at what certain political groups are doing, not only are they spineless, but they're not seeing the consequences of their decisions.
Right.
And people are tending to be a little, look, we've always been, ever since 1865, this country has been fighting the Civil War. It was
Yeah.
never, we know that. I have a lot of friends who are like from other countries,
Yeah.
and I try to explain to them what's going down in America. And I say, well, the Civil War is still being fought. They go, what are you talking about? They don't get it.
Yeah.
But instead of it being regional,
Right.
South versus North, it's kind of like dumbass versus a little more tolerant and caring and wanting to do things. And I think one of the reasons why people go dumbass is because they don't have the mental capacity. This society is so complex. The problems are complicated.
Right.
They don't, I don't, they may literally not have the mental capacity in their brains to deal with these complex problems. They short circuit out.
Yeah.
And some of the reason for that is, some of it is really chemical exposure. And
Mhm.
another way this is happening that's disrupting society is people go, well, look at all these, I'm LGBTQ supportive, totally, totally. So
Right.
I'm kind of speaking from what other people are saying, not what I think, but what
Right.
society, some of the suppressive forces in society are saying, like, why are there so many gender fluid kids?
Yeah.
Or why is my kid trans? Well, mom and dad, you, if you grew up, you're a boomer, or even um, if you're a boomer and you're wondering about that, your genes are different than your kids because you inherited genes from your parents who grew up before World War II,
Right.
when there was so much less exposure and their genes weren't modified. But I
Right.
grew up after World War II,
Yeah.
and I've been so chemically exposed that what happens is our genes get chemically modified,
Right.
they get modified. So maybe instead of producing more precise, balanced amounts of estrogen and testosterone, because of all these chemical influences, we're producing more estrogen now.
Right.
Also, chemicals that I've mentioned, like this acrylamide in the Justin's products and the Chex products, are estrogenic. They
Right.
fit like a lock and key into the cell receptors for our reproductive cells, which are both our brain and our genitalia. So when people go, why are our kids so gender fluid? Well, during pregnancy, when the fetus is developing, the
Mhm.
brain and the genitalia develop with a big surge of sex hormones.
Right.
Either they get the testosterone, which turns us into men like you and me,
Yep.
or lets us be a female, which is what we all are originally.
Right.
So what happens is the genitalia will get one surge of the sex hormones, but the brain, the other big sex organ in the body, may develops a month or two later in the process, and gets a different surge. Well, if mom
Right.
has been exposed to all these endocrine disruptors during pregnancy, the brain may develop in a more feminine way.
Right.
And so a child may be born with male genitalia and a female brain,
Right.
because the brain is a mosaic. There are lots of structures in the brain
Oh yeah.
with very technical names. I'm not a physiologist, but they develop under the influence of the sex hormones.
Right.
And the way we process things depends on how these different areas of the brain develop. And very small differences in the parts per billion and parts per trillion can lead the brain to develop in a more feminine manner.
Right.
So when you go, why are all these kids gender fluid? Why are the polarities between male and female breaking down? Well, we've been filling our kids up since the petrochemical revolution. We've been
Right.
modifying their genes. We've been filling them up with toxic chemicals, many of which interfere with the sex hormones.
Right.
So this is becoming disruptive to society, but
Yeah.
we can't go back.
Yeah.
The folks who are complaining, you know what? It was your politicians and your laxity and my laxity. I don't want to blame us, but I'm just pointing facts out
Yeah.
that allowed all these laws that we thought were protecting us actually protected industry and
Yeah.
chemicals. And
Yeah.
that's why our kids are different. That's disrupting society.
Right.
Now, as I said, I'm all for gender fluidity and LGBTQ plus.
Right.
Totally. I'm just trying to speak out, kind of show people what's going on and why some might call it disruptive,
Yeah.
but not really understand the root causes, the biology of what's
Right.
happening to society.
Right. No, and that's, I mean, the picture you painted in my head immediately turned to that, that little pond that's next to a chemical plant that's just getting runoff that nobody seems to pay attention to. And all of a sudden there's these, toads and fish and things that have got all these different misshapen parts and things. And people are like, oh, how did that happen? Well, it was the chemical exposure that
Yeah.
changed them at a genetic base. And
I mean, when you go to, for example, in Florida, the Florida panther has been having a really difficult time reproducing. And when
Mhm.
scientists look at their genitalia, many of the males have female appearing genitalia.
Mhm.
And that's because of their exposure. They're a high level predator to DDT and other
Yeah.
chemicals that act like estrogen. The sturgeon in the Missouri River are having a difficult time reproducing.
Right.
Their genitalia is somewhere between male and female.
Yeah.
We're very plastic organisms.
Right.
Our environment shapes us.
Yeah.
It always has. The
Mhm.
difference is that we've never been interacting with so many synthetic chemicals. And
Right.
that's the wild card today.
Yeah. And so I do want to go back to something that you touched on, with living near nuclear plants and um, the potential for iodine-rich foods and so just a anecdote that I happened to live in Scotland at the time that Chernobyl blew up. My dad was there for sabbatical, and so we were there for 6 months during the time that happened. And I remember that we had a snowstorm for a couple of days, and so he wouldn't let us out of the house. My dad's a veterinary pathologist, so right, like he was in tune with what's going on. And I just remember we had to take these huge iodine pills, and I had a trouble. I was at the time I had a big difficulty swallowing pills, and but these like I just remember them being huge. They may not have been huge, but I remember them being huge. And he was like, no, 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 this is why we have to do it. And at the time, I was I was 11 or 12 years old. So, I mean, I had a little bit of a grasp of what was, but I was like, okay, wait, I mean, I don't understand, but I'll take it. Um, I didn't understand why he wouldn't let us out of the house when the snow was falling. And he's like, it could be fallout. You don't know what could be, part of it. We don't want to be exposed to it. Of course, now I can look back and understand it all and be like, wow, I was really glad he did that. Because I don't know how much exposure I got from that, but I know that when you look back and you see once it exploded, where all the fallout sort of went, and some of it did come over to to England and Scotland and all of that area. And so I know it was definitely higher rates than it should have been.
So, Chernobyl in 86, which is what brought down the Soviet Union, in my opinion. But, we have much more innocuous but dire situations right now in America. I'll give you
Right.
another example that's in my book. In Mooresville, North Carolina,
Mhm.
there's the McGuire nuclear plant. But also what they've been doing in this town is using coal ash for
Mhm.
landscaping. Coal
Oh,
ash is produced from energy plants.
right.
These are big piles of ash, and they were using them for landscaping in schools, for roads, um, for agriculture, for potting plants, for gardens. They were giving this stuff away.
Yeah.
They used it to landscape high schools. Well, the problem is coal ash is filled with heavy metals from
Right.
burning coal. and coal ash is synergized by nuclear radiation.
Mm.
So all these kids in
Yeah.
Mooresville, North Carolina, are getting cancer,
Right.
thyroid cancer, rare cancers. And I spoke to one woman who's in the book. She's just a hero in my. Her daughter got thyroid cancer when they moved to Mooresville. They eventually had to leave
Hmm.
because, again, they weren't listening to the moms.
Right.
And if you live in Mooresville, North Carolina, you got to take those little um, iodine pills to prevent the
Mhm.
radiation. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for a Chernobyl because the low levels are also very dangerous.
Right.
Chernobyl exposed us to very high levels, and we could see it in some of the foods, like some of the pork from Sweden, the
Yeah.
mushrooms. Um, the thing though, Jerry, that's really important before so people really understand something is our bodies respond almost immediately to positive influences,
Oh, yeah.
environmental influences.
Yeah.
So while we're talking about all this negativity, there's no matter where you are at in your health, you can always improve it.
Hmm.
Your your body produces messenger RNA, which is like takes in everything from your internal and external environment. And the messenger RNA then tells the DNA what to do in response to these exposures.
Right.
When you feed your messenger RNA in your body good foods, reduce your chemical exposures, it sends much better messages to the DNA,
Yeah.
and your DNA structures are stronger. Um, uh, your hormone balances will improve. So you can make these changes and get results immediately. I'm
Yeah.
talking about the body responds in nanoseconds.
Yeah.
Now, you may not realize it until a few days later when you're thinking clearer, you feel healthier, but that's because of the moves you made, mom and dad, for yourself and for your
Right.
kids.
Right.
So don't get bummed out. We bring up the negative stuff because you need to know about it, but we also tell you what to do to combat it.
Right. Well, and that is definitely seen in making the shift from, a totally inorganic, we're just eating all processed foods that are chemically laden to shifting to mostly organic. Like you'll see those results fairly quickly. As far as you may not lose weight, you may not do like that kind of stuff. That takes longer. But as far as the feeling better and like, oh wow, I have energy, I'm thinking clearer, those types of things can happen fairly quickly if you change that input.
Oh, especially for kids.
Yeah.
If you have ADHD kids, and a lot of the pesticides in conventional foods are linked with ADHD, attention
Mhm.
deficit hyperactivity disorder, and you switch them to an organic diet, their ADHD will improve too. There are other things you need to do. Nature therapy is very helpful for
Right.
ADHD kids,
Right.
but you can put nature inside their bodies too by giving them
Right.
more wholesome foods.
Right. And that's another piece of it is that if you're in an environment and you maybe you can't do anything about it because maybe you work at one of these plants, maybe you work in a place where you're exposed to chemicals all the time, like well then combat that with spend some time in nature and let nature help you filter through and allow you to get like go to a park with a bunch of trees and so you're breathing air that's been filtered naturally, you know. And like you said, increase your filters in your home so you're breathing better air to combat that. So it's not just I get a high dose at work and then I get a medium dose at home.
Well, you're right, and work is can be like you said, working in some of these plants or other jobs. Like I was a call firefighter, and I've done a lot of reporting on the uniforms and protective gear for firefighters, which is
Yeah.
filled with toxic chemicals.
Yeah.
They do save their lives, but there are less toxic alternatives now as
Mhm.
technology improves. So, uh, it's true. I think there are some jobs that are very inherently dangerous,
Mhm.
and but you have to make up for it the best you can in the rest of your
Right.
life.
Right.
You have to do that. You're
Yeah.
right. Um, and on the other hand, though, when we buy safer products as consumers, we make the workplace safer for everyone.
Right.
You know, like when everyone was telling me that, you buy these organic strawberries, David, in the early 2000s, and they're very expensive. And they were going, why are you spending so much money on organics? It doesn't make any difference.
Mm-hmm.
Well, during the pandemic, I went up to a small town called Salinas
Mm-hmm.
in Northern California. Salinas is a farm town. It's where all our strawberries, lettuce, carrots, a lot of our fruits and veggies for the entire nation are grown in the Salinas Valley. And the town and all the schools are just carved out of the farm fields. Like you'll
Right.
see a little school and then all around it farm fields. In the early 2000s, when I would go up to Salinas, all these farm fields were being sprayed with organophosphate pesticides like
Mm-hmm.
diazinon and chlorpyrifos. Well, when I returned to the Salinas during the pandemic and I went to the same schools, they were all surrounded by organic strawberry and lettuce fields.
Hmm.
I called one of the teachers, Oscar Ramos, and I said, "What's going on, Oscar?" And he said, "Well, it's because people like you, David, were buying all these organic strawberries and all this organic food. You created the market, which led the farmers in Salinas to plant more organic crops.
There
So
you go.
now all the schools are surrounded by organic fields instead of being sprayed. That's not only good for the farm workers, it's
Right.
good for the kids. So
Yeah.
when we talk about making a safer environment, our choices can help both workers
Mm-hmm.
and kids. And the beautiful thing about it, I was kind of crying when I saw it because to me it was like I'm not religious in an organized sense, but if there's a miracle on earth and you don't have to go to a saint to do it, then
Yeah.
what I saw was a miracle because I had been buying all these organic strawberries and having people tell me I was an idiot for doing it because it was so
Yeah.
much more. And then I saw the difference it was making 20 years later when I
Yeah.
went to Salinas and I said, well, no, all these farm fields are now organic. That's because of people like me. It did make a difference. I
Right.
didn't know these kids. I don't know this farm work. I know the farm workers now because I've interviewed them, but I didn't at the time.
Yeah.
But it was making the difference in the lives of people I will never know.
Right.
That's a miracle in my book.
That
I
is.
had faith that buying all this organic stuff, even though it was expensive, was making a difference. I didn't have
Yeah.
proof, but I had faith. And
Right.
that faith was proven equals a miracle, at least
Right.
by my standard.
No, I agree. I agree. And it's proof that you can make a difference in the decisions that you make.
Oh,
And
we all can. We need
yeah.
to.
And you have to be you need to educate yourself on what you're purchasing to make sure that it's not just going to get the job done for what you need, but that it's going to be safe for you long term as
Oh,
well.
yeah, we can go a little further. Like, for example, one of the brands, when you're buying cleaning products now, I strongly recommend Ecos.
Hmm.
And you'll find them in stores all over. But
Yep.
one of the brands I don't recommend anymore is Seventh Generation.
Okay.
A lot of people are buying Seventh Gen because they think it's a really good brand. And for the most part, it's okay. But they are still using a chemical called ethoxylated alcohol in several of their products.
Hmm.
And these ethoxylated alcohols, unless I'm mistaken, and I've been talking to them, are all manufactured using a very difficult and powerful carcinogen called ethylene oxide.
Okay.
And they're made when it breaks down into the products, it can form dioxane, and that can show up in products. Now, Seventh Gen claims they have no dioxane in their product,
Hmm.
but as far as I understand, the process to make ethoxylated alcohol still involves ethylene oxide.
Hmm.
And there are all these ethylene oxide plants all over the country, and they're very low key. I just went to one when I was most recently in Cancer Alley. I visited one of these plants, but they're in Texas, they're in New Mexico, they're all over the country. They're all
Right.
over the country.
Right.
You don't know that they're ethylene oxide plants, but this stuff gets into the air,
Hmm.
and this is not ethylene oxide causes human cancer. I
Hmm.
mean, it's so bad we don't even have to do experiments or say it's a probable because we haven't done human experiments, which we shouldn't.
Right.
We know from epidemiological evidence this one's really bad.
Yeah.
So even though Seventh Gen may say that the chemical isn't in our products, the petrochemical is still being used to manufacture their products. So
Right.
if you buy their product, yeah, maybe it's non-toxic, but is it anti-toxic?
Right.
And, again, if because in my book, I tell you all the communities where to look for the ethylene oxide plants in case you live near one.
Yeah.
But, to me, 7th gen may be non-toxic, but it's not antitoxic. On the other hand, ecos cut out the ethoxylated alcohols altogether. So I
Okay.
call them, except for preservatives. Now, there's still a few phenoxyethanols being used in a lot of products. That's the one little break I give companies because there hasn't been an alternative yet for that that's
Right.
really effective for large scale, as far as I know. But
Right.
in terms of the Laura compounds, they're not using those, but 7th gen is. So
Yeah.
one product, 7th gen, is non-toxic, but one is antitoxic.
Right.
And I think if we want to make a difference as citizens, we should go a little bit further, not just protect ourselves, but try to think, like you were saying, think about our community at large
Right.
and what we can do for our community.
Yep. So, David, I want to be respectful of your time. And I want to thank you because this has been a great conversation. You've shared so much great information. How can people, how can they find your book? How can they find out more information about what you're doing, the foundation, and all that kind of stuff?
Raising Healthy Kids by David Steinman is available on all the book sites, whether you go to an independent, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, it's there. And I hope everyone will get a copy of the book because it's going to make a difference in your life and everyone else's life and your kids' life.
Yeah.
And you can visit my website, davidsteinman.us, or visit me on Instagram, where I post a lot of my work from Cancer Alley and other places.
Mhm.
It's David Steinman _author
Okay.
on Instagram, and by David Steinman on Twitter, where I also post. And I hope folks will get in touch with me, ask me their questions and stuff. I love talking to people. It's very exciting
Awesome.
because we're cutting across politics now, and I
Right.
really feel it. Whether you're red, blue, or somewhere in between, can't make up your mind.
Right.
Toxic chemicals cut across all that. They
Oh,
affect us
yeah.
all, rich or poor, black or white, male or
Yep.
female, gay or straight, the whole
Yep.
thing. We're
Yep.
all involved in it. And it's very powerful stuff. We feel better,
Yeah.
we make a difference. And it's the intersection of where so many movements come when we're empowered through our shopping decisions.
Yeah.
It's environmental justice.
Right.
It's health. It's supporting LGBTQ rights. It's caring about your neighbor.
Yeah.
It all happens with our shopping choices. We have so much power.
Yep.
And then if we can just include a little outreach activism, we can turn this thing around. We
Yeah.
really can, through our voting and through being aware. So
Yeah.
I hope this helps folks to just see that they have a lot of power for their own personal health and to make a difference in their
Yeah.
community.
Well, and like you did, I hope people look at it and say, if I start doing this one little thing, while it may take 15 or 20 years to see it on a larger scale actually make a difference, that my choices will make a difference down the road.
Oh, your kids are depending on your having the long view. The long view, you get that
Yep.
with a healthy brain, right?
Yep.
People
Yep.
who are toxified probably aren't thinking long view as much.
Yeah.
These things really matter.
Yep.
So you'll get immediate benefits, but your kids need our kids need us to be adults and do the right thing for them,
Yep.
for our health and for them.
Agreed. And thank you so much, David.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you so much.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.